Okay, so The Last of Us is out, and I've been going through Shot Deck for some cool scenes to recreate, and I found this one right here. And from this scene, I decided to create this. So if you're new to the channel, please like, subscribe, and let's get into it. So I'm going to open up Epic Games Launcher and open 5.5.4 and just click Launch. Okay, once this opens up, the next thing you do is go down to Games, click Third Person, and then when you see Project Location, you can just pick the location. I have this folder already created, and I'm just going to name this LOU for Last of Us _ tutorial. And then all these settings on the right are clear, and just click Create. Okay, so now that Unreal Engine is open, the next thing we can do is do Control Space, go over to the Content folder, right click, go up to Level, and I'm going to name this LOU _ tutorial again, and then open it up. Now, the reason why this is a completely black screen is because there's nothing in our level. So the first thing we need to do is go over to Window, go down to Environment Light Mixer, and just open everything up. And now we have a level. The next thing we can do is go over to where you see Selection Mode on the top left, go down to Landscape, and we can make the landscape 50 by 50. So change scale to 50. So just makes it a little smaller, saves on space, and click Create. And now we have our landscape. The next thing we can do is start off by modeling our actual scene. So if I switch back over to this right here, you're going to see we got 4 walls, a balcony, some pillars on each end, and then we have shutters. So the first thing we're going to want to do is kind of build out our 4 walls. So let me close this, and I'm going to first do Control Space and type in MANN in the search bar to get a mannequin. That way we have a little bit of a size reference while we're building. And then now that we have that, I'm going to go over from selection mode over to modeling mode. And the first thing I'm going to do is bring in a box. So if you click box and then click somewhere, it will just place wherever you click. And now we can manipulate and create the box we want to make. So first, I can increase depth and increase height. The actual size of it doesn't really matter. I can probably just stop it at 50, and we have a wall. The one thing I'm going to notice is it might not be high enough, so I'm going to go over to height and make it 2000. That actually might be a little too high, so maybe let's do 1500. I think that is pretty good depending on how far away it is. Yeah, I think that's good. And then we want the length to be longer. This I will make 2000 just to be sure we're safe and we can adjust if needed. The next thing we can do is go over to the width, depth, and height subdivision and increase these. The reason we want to increase these is because I do plan on adding displacement onto these walls. So when we bring in a material, we want to displace the material to add some actual texture to the wall. If we have no subdivisions on these walls, the displacement will not activate because it has nothing to really displace. So increase the subdivisions to 100 for this one. And then when you see world space UV scale, just click right here, which is going to even out the UVs, and we are good to go. Click accept. Now that you've clicked accept, the next thing we can do is hold command and drag it. If we hold those two together, it will drag and create a new wall. And then do that again, and then hit E to go to rotation on the keyboard and rotate it 90 degrees. Now if you click on it and then click W, you can now get the movement gizmo, and we can bring it in. Next thing is you guys look just barely lined up, so I'm going to move you 1 over. And then for you, we can also move you 1 over and then in. And now we have just barely our 4 walls. Let me 1 more notch, and let's check this one too. This also needs 1 more notch. And with that, we have all our 4 walls of our scene. So the next thing I'm going to do to kind of make sure the scale of our scene is correct, because I'm feeling like it is a little big, is I can go out of modeling mode into selection mode, hit this box with the plus, go down to cinematic, and add in a camera actor. Now here I can pilot it and kind of move it over into the corner and line up close to this shot right here. This feels pretty good. Also, if you hold right click and drag down on the mouse, if you look right here at the top, this camera will be, the number next to the camera will be decreasing. That means it's slowing down the camera movement. If you scroll up, you can see that number go up and then the camera moves faster too. So this helps kind of adjust the movement of the camera as well. Now I can click on the camera, go down and switch the digital film to DSLR, which is going to give us much more space. And then I'm going to even make this 28. And this is the scene we're working with, which is definitely a little too big. So let me kind of move it to here. I think that works. I can eject, pin it, and then now I can probably move you. Let's do 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. It's a little better. I'm trying to make sure it's even on both sides, or at least as even as we can get it. I think that is looking good for now, and we can create the balcony and other things, and if we need to make it smaller, we always can. So now that we have this kind of fixed, the next thing we can do is go back into selection mode, go down to modeling, and create another box. Now this one is going to be our balcony. So we can bring down the height to probably about, I'm going to go with like 1 full box length. I think that's about 100. So we got 100 on there. Let me bring it across and up so we can kind of imagine the size of it. And then go width to make it larger. I'm going to do 250 for now. No, that's too short. Let's do 500 and bring it in. We can always adjust it inwards if needed. And then its width can also be increased. I'm going to make the width 1500 and kind of go like that. So that is going to be our top balcony. That's looking pretty accurate to what I see here. We might make it a little longer. So let me go to width and maybe make it just 600 and then drag it out to make sure it's actually using all 600. That might be a little too large, so maybe it is 500. I just didn't have it out far enough. Yeah, let's go with 500. And then I can also bring it in if I feel like it's a little too long. And then when it comes to the actual length, let's do 2000 to make sure we have a long enough object. And now we can click accept. So now that that's done, we can do the same thing we did before. I'm going to actually drag you into 1 full square in, and then I'm going to do Alt Command and bring you again 1 full square in. And then I can drag you and spin you to 90 degrees, kind of just align you 1 full square in. And then for you, I can drag you out so you're just attaching to each other. You can always get close to make sure it is lined up appropriately. And same with this one. And now we have our balcony. So the next thing we can do is bring in our pillars. So to do that, I'm going to again open a box, drag a box right here, drop it, adjust the depth to be much less. I actually think 100 by 100 works just fine. And then we can increase the height. I think the max height is going to be just fine as well. And you can line it up. It's going to go with U1 back, U1 back. So now you're lined up pretty well in there. And then just to be safe, I might just do like 1200 just in case we need some extra space up there. And then I can also keep the subdivisions there as well and click accept. And then again, hold command, drag across. And now, oh, drag it one more across. We have our scene, for the most part, pretty much mocked up. So I'm going to go out of modeling mode real quick, go into camera, pilot it, and just make sure we're kind of working with the exact kind of look and feel of the scene that I am trying to grab. And then character can probably go like this and this and this. Bring it a little closer. And then let's check our image. We got this right here, and we got this right here. Looking pretty good so far. We're not looking for an exact copy. We're really just trying to do a good mimic is what I would say. So this is looking pretty good. I can eject from here, and then now we can kind of clean up our area on the right. So let me right click, create a folder, name this cinematic. And under cinematic, I will drag the camera and I will drag the mannequin and close. And then I'm going to open another one and name this environment. And then grab all of these and drag into the environment folder. And then last one will be objects. And drag all these into objects. So now we are nice and organized. Okay, so the next thing we can do is create the actual shutters. So if I shoot over here to what we're trying to kind of recreate, you can see we have shutters right here, and right here. I'm not sure if they're on the roof. It's kind of hard to tell what's up there, but I do want shutters up there as well. So I can kind of mimic the way these pieces kind of wave using the lattice tool. However, it's much easier if I just create shutters. Also, with the overall scene I'm trying to create, I think the shutters work best anyways, and they are much less work to actually create. So what we're going to do is head back to Unreal, and I'm going to start over here in this corner, and I'm going to go to Model Mode, go to Box, and drop a box here. Now I'm going to adjust the height all the way down till we get a good height. I think 300 is a good place to start. I want this to be one notch above the ground. So checking what we have here, this looks pretty good. And then I can increase the length to maybe 220. And the depth is probably going to be something like 10. That changed much more drastically than I thought it would. Okay, it went backwards. So let me move you forward, and then you're going to be the frame. So I think maybe 15 might be best. I think you can be a little higher, maybe 320. Nope, 310. That seems to be working. And then maybe one notch backwards so you're not as far up on the wall. And I think this is looking good. Now, the only thing to keep in mind is the subdivisions right here will bog down your system because you're basically making more detail in your objects. So if you don't plan on displacing your objects, there's really no point having a high subdivision count. It will just slow down your computer. So in this case, I don't actually intend to add anything displacement wise to these shutters. So we can just decrease this to 1 to save us on the space. And so we're using 15 for width, 220 for depth, and 310 for height. And then subdivision is all 1. And just to kind of make sure it's looking good, you can go over here, click on the camera, and pin it. And that's kind of how big our shutters are going to be, which I think are pretty appropriate. So with that, I'm going to click accept. Now that we have this, I'm going to do command and just drag it one notch out to create a copy. Now this copy is going to be, actually, let's rewind. This copy is going to be one full notch smaller. I actually don't want it to be that smaller. So if it's going by too drastic of a size, you can go over here to size and kind of decrease the scale. I'm going to make it 0.1 and then decrease it by 0.1. That's still too much. So redo, and let's decrease it by 0.03. Nope. It's going up, go down. That's one up, that's one down. Perfect. Now I can bring it up by 1. And now we have a nice little cutout of our scene, although I think it went up by too much. It did. Okay, so under this scenario, what you can do is either adjust this or adjust the size one more notch. I'm going to adjust the size one more notch, so it's going to go down. Got it, down. That's one. That's two. Okay, and then now I can bring you up, and this is going to be the size of our frame. Okay, so now that that's done, I'm going to hit R and elongate it so it cuts through the frame because we're going to be using this to cut it. Now all you need to do is click the frame, click the box you just used to cut it with, go over to mesh, go over to model and click Boolean. Now, if you did it correctly by clicking the frame and then the box, this is what you should see. If you click the box and then the frame, all you need to do is do B minus A. So just test it out. Either it's A minus B or B minus A, but the idea is you want this frame that you see here. And then once you see that frame, you can click accept. And now we have a nice little frame in our scene. Now, the next thing you can do is go over to create, add a box, drop the box. Let's try and line it up as best we can with our object. Decrease the height all the way down. Maybe bring it up one. And then the idea is to still slim this down. So we got the depth is the depth is the length, but we can probably do 200. See how that looks. 200 is a little long, so maybe 210. That's looking much better. Width can be 5. So now it's much thinner. And then I kind of want it to tilt this way. I think that's looking good, generally speaking. I think it can be slightly thinner. So maybe let's do a 10, a 5. That's the length, sorry. Let's keep it at 10. Okay, 10. And then let's maybe make it 2 so it's nice and thin. And I think that's looking good. Trying to see, maybe it's a little too small. So in this case, let's do 11 and 12. Okay, so we're doing 2 width, depth is 210 and height is 12. Clicking accept, switching it over to evening it out. If it doesn't even out perfectly, all you need to do at this point is turn off the grid, move it. You can even kind of adjust it that way, then turn the grid back on. Now we have a nice little shutter, and then I'm going to do control or command and shift and drag it one up, and then just keep doing that until we have all of our shutters. The other thing you can note is if you feel like you want the angle to be a little more, you can always hit all of them and angle them like that, but it'll move them all over. So truthfully, you want to make sure your original is the most even to how you want your shutters, and then you can adjust from there. So I'm actually going to increase my angle just slightly more and then go back to it. Now, if anyone is curious as to why I was holding shift, what happens is when you hold shift and you copy something, you'll move the camera with it, which is very handy. So I was holding shift and command to kind of move all the way up. Now, once that's done, you can hit, what's this box? Okay, that box is in there. You can close the objects. Once that's done, you can grab the Boolean, which is our frame, and then shift click the bottom to grab all of our objects. And then you can right click, go over to group and click group. So now if I want to move it, I don't need to click each individual object. I just click the main one. Now, before I move this to all its appropriate spaces, I do want to texture it with a material, so it's just easier doing it that way. So for now, I will just keep this one version here and then move it once we have it fully colored. Which brings us to our next stage. So now we can go into Fab and grab some materials to actually add to everything we just created to give it some life. So for that, I'm going to go back to selection mode. and then hit Window and go over to Fab. Now, once you're inside Fab, the first thing you can do is go over to the Quixel library, always easiest way to handle this. And then once in the Quixel library, you can hit Materials and Textures. Now, the first thing we're going to want is paint. So I'm going to go up to the search bar and type in paint, and not 4, but enter. And here is all the paint. So the entire idea behind this is it's a little dystopic, it's a little run down, it's kind of worn out. So what we want to look for is a kind of materials that emulate that in our scene. So just kind of scrolling down, I'm going to find this right here, which is old painted wall. I'm going to switch this over to high quality, which is going to enable us to download the height texture and add to project. And if you're ever not sure if you have the height texture, it's this one _H will be the height texture, and this is our material. So I can close that and then go back out. And now I want to type in, we actually can do just simple wall paint. So we have this simple wall paint right here. I'm actually going to add this to our scene as well. This is what I'm going to use for our shutters. It looks fine right now, but I'm going to add decals to the shutters to kind of give them some edge. So for right now, just a simple wall paint works well. Getting out of here, now I can type in plaster, which in my opinion kind of gives more of a concrete look, but this should do as well. The idea now is again to find some like worn looking plaster that we can use for our walls. And this is the texture right here. Again, high quality, and add to project. So now we have our 3 main textures. The next thing I can do is do Control Space, go over to Fab, and filter for material instance. Right now I have material instance right here in the filters area. If you don't have yours here, all you have to do is go over to this, the filter menu, go over to materials and click on material instance. Once you do that, it'll pop up right here, and you can always then re-click it whenever you need to add it. So now that I have that done, I'm going to drag and drop this onto all of our walls. And then drag and drop the plaster onto all of the plaster walls. And then lastly, I can go over here. Might be able to do this on there. So it has a torn frame, and then I can just add the white to each individual piece. So now that all those are added, I also just noticed I have all these objects out here on the side. I can drag and drop that in here. Group actor can also be, oh, group actor has to stay out. Okay. So now materials are on everything, and as no surprise, it looks pretty bad. So what we need to do is click on the walls and then go over here to materials where you see element 0. Double click on that to bring this up, and you can click down on global. We can go over to tiling and make this -0.2. And now we have a much bigger material size on our walls, which looks a lot more accurate. And if you want, you can always lessen the size, increase the size. I'm going to go with 0.3. And then if you want to offset it to kind of get a little more what you're looking for, maybe kind of roughed up at the top, you can do that. And that is what we're looking at. Now, what I want to do is enable displacement. To do that, I need to make sure that our static mesh is nanite. So you can click on the actual wall, go over here to static mesh, and click on the folder. Once you're inside the folder, this little sign right here means it's nanite, but let's double check. It is not. Enable nanite. And once you enable nanite and you get close to the object, it just barely shows. So we can click on the box now, go over here, and let me make it a little smaller. I can go over to displacement. That is clicked. Go down to advanced settings. Sorry, material property overrides. Enable tessellation, and then displacement scaling. Make it 10, and lo and behold, we're now getting some texture on our walls, which is exactly what we want. And now I can click save. The next thing I want to do is the same thing for this. I'm going to double click on it and go over to the material. Once you are at the material, I can go over to tiling and make it 0.2, make it much larger, which looks much more natural. And then if we want, we can also enable tessellation. I will say when it comes to boxes, tessellation sometimes will rip at the seams. But let's see how it ends up. So I'm going to click on it, go over to our static mesh, find it, right click on it, make it nanite. It is now nanite enabled. It looks like it hasn't pulled apart from itself yet, which is good, and has added just a small bit of texture to it throughout, which again is also good. This one hasn't had it added. So let me click on here and then go over and enable nanite. Same thing, you can kind of see it being a little weird at the seams, but it's still okay. And we have just a nice texture to it overall, which is looking pretty good. Okay, next is our shutters. Shutters have everything on it now. So now we can go about just duplicating it. So I'm going to duplicate it upwards and kind of have it up here. And then I can duplicate it and spin it. Kind of see where it lands right here. That's looking good. Duplicate it down. Then duplicate it across. Duplicate it up. And I think that is all looking good. The only other thing that I do want to add, if you go over here, you don't really see it on this side. It's kind of a little more cramped than the scene that we're creating. But I do want like this area to be filled so it feels like there's a wall right there. So I'm actually going to just click on both and then duplicate them and just move them off to the corner just so it kind of feels like there's also a wall there and kind of creates the illusion that there's space being filled in that area. And then now we have our scene fully blocked out. Now the next thing we can do is just go through the landscape and kind of give some sediment to the landscape. So if you go over here, you can kind of see there's like plants growing in this corner and in this corner and right here. The way I read that is since the water came in, it probably pushed some sediment in here and kind of raised some areas. And if I want to like emulate that, I can do that with the landscape by going over here at the top where you saw selection and modeling and just going over to landscape. I can change the brush size to 50, which is going to make it much smaller. I have tool at 3 and I am on sculpt. And if you just kind of push down, it'll just raise our scene. And the idea here is settlement kind of just built up in these areas and in these corner walls, maybe sediments right here as well. Kind of just building up in different areas. And what I can do later on is use this sediment or this increase in the ground to help build foliage upon, which is going to be kind of handy to use. And then I think that's good enough. We don't really, I'm not sure if we're going to need to build stuff back there. So now we have our scene pretty well sculpted out. If you don't like anything that you just put down, you can also smooth it down if you want it to be a little smaller. You can kind of increase, I guess, maybe 100. I don't know why it's not working. There we go. Which will bring it down and kind of smooth it back out. Okay. So back into selection mode, the next thing we can do is start working on bringing in all the assets into our scene to kind of finish it out. Okay, so now let's head back into Fab. So again, I'm going to go over to the top left, click Window, and then click Fab. Once I'm inside Fab, the next thing I can do is type in Saloon. And you're going to see this right here, Saloon Interior. Click on that. I like this pack a lot, although it doesn't really fit the time period that I'm creating. A lot of the stuff can be repurposed to kind of fit the scene that I'm creating. So I'm going to grab this and add it to my project. And when you see this asset not compatible, just make sure to pick the most recent version. In our case, it is 5.4 and add to project. After that, the next thing you can do is add in rural Australia. So if you just type in rural, hopefully it pops up with just that. Let's see. It does not. If it doesn't, then the next part to this is Australia. Oh, it's actually right here. So this is what it looks like, Roll Australia. You can definitely use some of the plants that this one kicks in. If you want to add some branches, go for it as well. But generally speaking, the reason I'm bringing this in is it has a really good water material that we can use to create our water for the scene as well. So I'm going to go over here and add this to project. Again, asset not compatible. Just pick the most recent, which is 5.4, and add it to your project as well. So now that those two are being added, the next thing we can do is type in plants. And these are all the plants we have available to us. I'm going to kind of quickly go through all the different assets I add to my scene. So it'll be plants, and then I'll let you know when we switch to decals and the other things that I want to add as well. So for plants, we are going to use English ivy, ferns, curbside weeds, broom creeper, and some clovers. Once that's done, I'm now going to head over to decals, and we can actually remove paint or plants from the search bar. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Under the scenario, you can again go back to publishers and look up Quixel. And then just click decals. And under decals, you're going to have a bunch of different options. I'm going to look for mud, sediment, and cracks. So first one up is mud stains, more mud stains, and even more mud stains. Once that's done, we can type in concrete. This is going to allow us to get some good cracks going. So I'm going to click here and get a concrete crack and get more concrete cracks. And let's just do one more. And then from here, we can go back out and type in blood. And then we can use a bunch of different blood assets as well. Again, nothing good happened in this world that we're creating. So it kind of makes sense to have blood spatter and other things on these walls. And then once all that's done, we can end in with some graffiti. And then just going to grab different paint to kind of mess up our scene even more with like stuff that people wrote throughout the time in which the world kind of fell apart. Then maybe just one more, I don't know, whatever this says, and add that. Okay. And with that, we now have all the materials we're going to need to kind of set up our scene. And then if we need to go back to fab, it'll just be for small, minor things along the way. Okay, so now that we've gotten most of the assets, the next thing we can do is add in the water. So to do that, let's go over here to the box with the plus, go over to shapes, click plane. I can get a little higher, click on the plane, and then just enlarge it so it fills our scene. Once that is done, I can now do control space, kind of close the fab, but go over to rural Australia, switch for material instance. And if you scroll down, you're going to see this MI water 1, drag and drop that onto our plane. And now we have water. Now, if you're looking at it, you can tell it is probably a little more overactive than it needs to be. If you want to adjust it, you can click on these settings. And I believe the one that I found that does the most is the grazing exponent. You can increase it or kind of decrease it to make it more or less intense. In our case, I'm going to go for less. And I think 10 is probably a good place to hang out for now. Okay, so now that our water is in, the next thing we can do is start adding in some items for our scene to build it out. One interesting thing is that you can go to the saloon and kind of click on the maps and then open up any of these packed levels, which is kind of interesting when it comes to bringing in assets into our scene at a much faster pace. So if I go over here and kind of click on this level, here's that level opened up, kind of showing us everything that is available to us for our scene, which is all very helpful. And then over here, it already has some of this stuff kind of set up for us to play around with, which is also pretty helpful to at least see or grab from as we go. So if I want to just say grab this entire bar piece, I can kind of copy everything that was used here, even the photos. Let me grab a few more bottles. Copy, copy, copy. And then I can copy it. And then once I do that, I can head back over to our scene. And I can paste it. Right here. I can have a bar already created. And then I can even right click on it and group it so it's all together. And then I can move it in, turn it, bring it down and around. Now we have a bar sunk in and against the water. Also, if you don't want the water to be seen, so you can kind of line everything up correctly with the ground, you can definitely do that. But now we have a bar kind of quickly added into our scene without having to worry about each of the individual pieces. And then later on, I can ungroup it and kind of like have things dropped or drawn or play around with it any way I see fit. And then I can add in the water to kind of get a better idea. And then lastly, I can also grab the camera so I can see how that looks in our scene. So say for our scene's sake, I kind of want the entire bar to be seen. I can kind of adjust it and show it that way. Okay, so now we can start going about adding in all the assets into our scene. Okay, so now that we have the initial static meshes added in, next thing we can do is actually adjust the lighting to get closer to the scene that we want to create. So before we do anything, what I'm going to do is go over to the box of the plus, go over to lights, and then add in a spotlight. Now I'm going to drag this spotlight up and over, and then I can go over to bring it up and drop it in environment. Didn't work that easy. Did it go in? Nope, decided to go into a box. Let's drag and drop that into environment. So we have the spotlight, and then we can go over to the directional light and basically just turn it off. So now all we have is a spotlight in our scene, kind of giving it light. Now, if we shoot back over to our reference, which is this right here, you can tell there is a very strong light coming from the top, and then we have some light over here in the corner. It looks like there's a lamp on right here. So what we can do is shine the light down and then kind of add some light over here for texture. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab onto this, kind of increase it or raise it, and then increase the light all the way. And have it again a little higher up and maybe a little to the side. And we can kind of adjust it that way. Now what we can do is change the attenuation radius so it is affecting more of our scene. Then we can do the inner cone and the outer cone. And then we can also change the soft source, as well as if you go down to the indirect lighting intensity, we can kind of just adjust the indirect lighting a bit, maybe make it 2 so we don't have such an obvious spotlight effect. And we can always adjust down the overall color. The next thing is you can tell that this is very white, and in here our main color is yellow. So we can also adjust the color here to kind of get closer to that yellow feel, like that. And kind of shooting back and forth, you can get an idea of the color we're kind of going for. Now I can bring you across, bring you down, a little lower as well. It's going to light too much of our scene. I think the height is looking pretty good. But we do want to get rid of some of these lines. But for now, this is looking good. The only thing I would change is we can actually adjust the actual yellow color of our scene. The next thing we can do to make sure that the color is coming out accurately is actually add a volume to our scene. So for that, I'm going to go over here to the box with the plus, go over to volume, and then go down to post-process volume. And inside the post-process volume, once it's clicked, I can go up here, kind of close the objects, and bring the post-process volume into environment. And then click on the post-process volume and type bound, and you're going to get this infinite extent unbound. Click that, and that means now the volume is going to affect our entire scene, which means the next thing we can do is type in exposure and make sure that our exposure is not being adjusted for where we are. So we can turn on the min and max and then make this the same number. I'm going to go with 0, and then we can kind of adjust from there. -1, -1, let's do -2, -2. I think this is looking pretty good. Maybe just -4, -4 seems like the right direction. And then you can also adjust the spotlight if needed to make it brighter for our scene. Now, the next thing is if I go back, you're going to see there's a bunch of atmospherics. You can see light is bouncing definitely in the sky. It's not just, perfectly see-through, which means there is some fog. So to do that, you can go over here to the exponential height fog and increase the fog this way. It won't affect it too much because we don't have volumetrics on. So if you scroll down, you can find volumetric fog right here and click it on. And now we have that nice atmospheric in our scene. Now, generally speaking, the point two, I keep misclicking. Go over to environment height fog. The point two is good, and you can also increase the fog density as well to give more of a foggy effect. And I believe you can even click on the spotlight and have the volumetric scattering intensity increase as well to kind of add to it. This is probably a little too much, but just kind of giving you an example of how much we can add. In our case, I'm going to actually go with 2.25 to start, and then I can kind of adjust you down or up depending. I definitely don't want it to illuminate too much above, but I can also change the outer cone. So maybe bring it up. This can increase, but I can reduce the outer cone. So it's more kind of shining light onto our character, not necessarily our entire scene. And then I can bring it down to get that pop up there. Increase the outer cone. Maybe bring it just slightly up. And let's compare this to our scene. I feel like that is looking pretty good. Now, the next thing we can do is start adding in some decals to give more life to our scene. So we can do cracks on our walls, kind of mess up these shutters a little more, add some graffiti, and make it feel like it's been messed up throughout the years. So now kind of heading back into our content browser, I'm going to do Control Space. Go over to Fab now. Instead of clicking static meshes, I can go back to material instances where I can find these and I can drag them onto our scene. If it's ever looking weird like this, what it means is you need to turn it. Before you do that, always advise to kind of switch on the snapping tool. That way you know you're getting 90 degrees and then kind of adjust it accordingly. Also, one other tidbit, if you see it not having that much color, in our case, this is actually a little bright. If you see that occurring, you can, or sorry, nope, that's the wall. If you see it being pitch black like this is the back side of the material. This is not how it's supposed to look. If you ever do see it being pitch black, just turn it the other way and you should see the color come through. I understand it's kind of hard to see with the yellow, but this is a green color, whereas this backside is just pure black. So if you ever have that issue, it's usually just because you need to turn it. Also, when it comes to this, where it's being very bright and see-through, let me click on it and kind of move it. If laid out, you'll see how it's a little see-through. You can always adjust that as well by clicking on the material, going over to specular and reducing the specular as well. So it's not necessarily see-through to your scene. So the higher the specular, the more it's going to be see-through, or the more it's going to, reflect. So you can reduce the specular down. It's not wet paint, it's dry paint. So this kind of fits the overall feel much better. So now that I've added that in, I'm going to keep adding in some more stuff to kind of rough it out. So follow along. So now that we have fully decaled our scene, the next thing we can do is start adding in our foliage, which is really going to bring this entire thing to life. So to first do that, we are going to do some hand selection. And then after that, we can actually start using the foliage tool right here. But to start it off, let's use just hand pick, and we can do control space, go over to fab, cancel out the material instance and go to static mesh and just start dragging and dropping in our foliage. Okay. And now that we have all the broom creeper in, the next thing we can do is go over to the foliage mode. And inside the foliage mode, we can open up this and kind of just add a bit of weeds. Let's add maybe 3 different types of weeds to our scene. Then we can go up and add some clovers. Then we can go down and add, where's the ferns? There we go. This is the ferns. And add in our ferns. Then we can decrease the brush size so it is a correct brush size. We can get rid of the static mesh. The reason why I want to get rid of static mesh is because we don't want it to paint on our water. And then I'm just going to make this 20 so it's nice and small. Okay, So now that our scene is pretty much finished, there's two main things that I'm going to bring into it that I don't necessarily go over. And one of them is the Rococo animations, or rather the animation that I use. I'm not fully going into it because to clean up the animation is a kind of tutorial in and of itself. So what I do suggest in replace of what I'm doing is to use Mixamo animations. There's plenty of them that you can use, and there's a lot of ways you can use the animation to connect to itself to get really good results. So if you want to animate a character for the scene, I definitely suggest going over to Mixamo and grabbing those animations. The next thing I do is bring in a metahuman with clothes on them. The reason why I don't go over this in this tutorial is because, again, it is a tutorial in and of itself. And on top of that, I have a tutorial that I'll show on the screen right now that explains everything and how to do this. I even grab the same character that I create in that tutorial to use in this scene. So if you want to check that out and use a metahuman for this scene, please check out that tutorial to kind of bring in the character, set it up the way you want it to, and then import it into your scene. Okay, so now that I have brought in my animations and metahuman, I have added them to a sequencer. If you're not sure how to add a sequencer into your scene, all you need to do is use the clapperboard up at the top left and click Add Sequence. From there, you can click Add to add in your camera, as well as any character you have for your scene. Now, having added all those things, this is what our scene looks like. And I want to change up the camera movement a little bit to make it feel a little more immersive and realistic for the scenario, which means we want to add slight movement to the camera itself, as well as some camera shake. So to create that, I'm going to do Control Space to bring up my content browser. I'm going to delete the camera shake I already made and tested, and then right click again and go up to Blueprint class and click on that. Once that opens up, I'm going to go down to all classes, and then in all classes, I'm going to type in camera shake. And then you want to add camera shake base and then click select. Now that that's done, you can name this whatever you want. In my case, I'm going to do BP underscore camera shake and then open it up. Once you open it up, again, just close it down. This is to get the settings only instead of the graph. So then now if I open it up, now we're just getting settings only. Now the first thing I'm going to do is make the pattern over to Perlin. So Perlin noise is the pattern, and then you can bring down location, rotation, and timing. The first change is to make sure duration is set to 0. This means it can be adjusted forever. After that, for the location and rotation, frequency, and amplifier, I'm just going to change the values to 0.5 for every single one. Once that's done, just compile and click save. Now, back in your camera sequencer, if you go to your camera and you click the plus sign, there's going to be an option for camera shake. Go to there, and then your Blueprint class will pop up. Click on that. Once that pops up, you're going to have a yellow bar. That is your camera shake, and just extend that for the full value or full duration of your scene. And now you'll have a slight camera shake in your scene. Now, the next thing I want to do is add some movement. And to do that, I can go over here to the transform value and click the little plus, which is locking our camera where it is currently. Now I can go to the end of our scene, move my camera forward to where I want it to be at the end of its movement and click another plus. Now, if I go all the way back and click play, the camera shake is there as well as the slight movement for my camera. Now, the last thing in our scene that needs to be added is the piano. I thought it would be cool to add in the piano since it was featured in the Last of Us scene. So I found this piano here in this Old West Volume 6 pack. You can find this on Fab. So just go over to there, add it to your project, and then add in the piano into your scene. Okay, now with some final touches added throughout our scene, such as the light in the right corner, the piano, and a little bit of foreground elements, my scene is now complete. Now, the last bit that we need to do is just go over how to render our scene. So to do that, we need to enable some plugins because if you go over to Clapperboard to render, you're going to see just the legacy version only. So go over to the edit panel and then go over to plugins. And in plugins, type in movie render queue and enable this plugin. Once that pops up, you're going to have restart on the bottom right. Just save all and restart. Okay, so now that your project is back open, you can go over to the three dots on the side of the clapperboard to check. You'll see Movie Render Queue, which means it's open. Click on the clapperboard, then click on Unsaved Config. And you can go up to the settings and add in console variables, anti-aliasing, and .exr. You can delete JPEG, and then for anti-aliasing, just switch it over to 12 and check off the override. So make sure temporal sample count is 12. You check off the override. There's nothing to do with .exr or game overrides. Just bring those in. And then once that's done, go over to your output tab and click on where you want it to output. Find the file or folder where you want the output to export to. Select it, click accept, and then click render local. And that is how you render your scene. Hey guys, so I hope you liked the tutorial. As always, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.